I can pull it up on my phone.
All right, go live.
We're live.
Okay. Okay, testing. Is this working?
Oh, let me turn this on. Move this on.
Testing. Testing.
Ready?
Hello. I'm hearing it.
Thank you. You're welcome. Here.
Testing. Testing. Jason had it working a minute ago. How's Jason? We're not looking for the whole mic system though. We're not looking for the whole mic system. We are not looking at the
Hey, Jason, do you know how to make this microphone work?
Yeah, you just hold, it's just turn this on. It should be fine. If it's red, it should, is it on, Pete?
It's on.
We just tested it.
Hello, hello. Testing. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
I think technology broke today.
Yeah, we're having
Well, here, Pete, I'm gonna just give you regular mics back here.
Okay.
Because you don't have a need for that at the moment.
well, at the moment, we don't. That's not what I asked for.
I understand, we had it working and I
Oh,
can't,
yeah, we're-
I can't help if it's,
Yes, yeah.
I can't help that, that just happened. We just tested it and it worked fine.
Okay,
Maybe we'll get lucky.
all right. Are we good? We're live?
Mhm.
All right, welcome to a special meeting of the Police Policy Committee. It is November 11th, Monday. It is 12:06, and I'll call this meeting to order. Roll call, Sean Benito,
Present.
Kyle Early,
Present.
Alana Garrett Ferguson is absent, Pete in wheelchair, I am here. Agenda review, one additional item we will add is a discussion, if time permits, of the corrective action guidance, GPO. Other than that, we have minutes. And is there any other agenda items that you all want to add or consider? Okay. We're gonna have the minutes too from August 21st, July 17th, and is there an April date?
Yes. Send it out.
Okay, so are there any questions about August 21st and July 17th? They're pretty straightforward. Okay,
Then I'll make a motion to pass them.
I'll second it.
okay, let's do a roll call vote. Sean Benito,
Aye.
Tyler Lilly.
Aye.
Pete Van aye. So the minutes from August 21st and July 17th are passed. And we will see if we have time later to look at April. If time permits. Is there any public comment today? Okay, no public comment. So we will jump right into our new business, the unarmed aircraft systems GPO 4.06.17. We do have a couple members of the policy from the Division of Police here if we have questions. But this has been, so this is a draft that was created by a work group, a small work group. And then we've had some discussion with the division's policy unit on it. And so there's been some back and forth, and I think we're in pretty good shape. Ryan Walker also did a little bit of research. I think you all saw, there was actually the video that was sent out about the system that the division has. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if there are questions or if we want to kind of go through it at all. If there's, some of the track changes that are in here right now, you can see there's some highlighted areas and some track changes. For example, the first one, the blackout mode, we added that based on Ryan Walker's research. We wanted to make sure that it was clear when about blackout mode or stealth mode, and then we included something later on that as well. A lot of the highlighted areas were taken and adapted from the Oakland policy, Oakland, California. They have a very strong policy oversight group there, for the technology and surveillance stuff. So we borrowed from that. So in our conversations with the division, we've kind of refined some of that. We took some things that were more like user manuals language and put it into definitions. We we made sure that, we weren't too limiting on when the drones can and should be used. So we created some other opportunities there. If you look on page 3, F9, I believe, item G, we added some additional purposes here that are not listed but don't violate the constitutional protections as guaranteed in the Fourth Amendment, and that they must be approved. So we didn't give blanket approval for whatever they needed for, but we wanted to give them some flexibility. Yes, Commissioner Benito.
Yeah, I had one question about number 8. So I guess I was not totally sure about what the difference is between high-level observation and not flying or hovering over a crowd, because I guess is that is there certain meters for that? I guess my understanding is that they would do high-level observation by flying it over the crowd. So I guess, yeah.
Well, so this came about because from the Oakland policy, from other policies we've seen, there's definitely a desire to not be hovering and over where it might be a risk to people if there's a malfunction. So we changed the language to sort of look at, okay, you can look at it from afar, because the input from the division was we need to be able to observe crowds, it's for safety, but we also wanted to make sure that we reduce that risk of hovering and being right over it, unless there's a very specific thing happening where you want to be close and you're observing a group or something, a probable cause that a crime is happening, right? So we don't have specific distances, but
I guess to me, high-level observation, hovering seems like it's kind of what's the word, common sense, but flying over versus high-level observation, I'm not sure I understand what that distinction is. And then if we're trying to hold people accountable to that, I'm curious. Yeah, I wonder if there should be some sort of distinction made there, or else I just don't know how we can ensure that it's followed.
do you have a recommendation or thought? And go ahead. I'll ask the policy unit folks. I mean, this is newer language from the last conversation, and I know that Commander Schlatt had looked at it, so I don't know.
And the one thing I'll comment, I am a Part 107 certified FAA UAS pilot. Okay, so some of the stuff is regulated by the FAA already.
Okay.
So what they state is that you shouldn't fly over a crowd intentionally, right? So at all costs, any Part 107 FAA operator is going to take a route that does not have that. Now hovering, if I were to hover, I'm going to hover over some trees, and the cameras can zoom in to have that. There's usually always a safe spot should this thing tumble out of the sky for some reason, a bird crash into it, something happen that is outside of the control of the pilot. It will tumble down into a tree or a safe area. If there's a cemetery close, that generally there's no people there, those types of things. But as a pilot, you would know, like, this is where I'm going to set up, this is where I'm going to kind of do my surveillance from. So at all costs, you should. Is it going to happen periodically because there's no way to get around it, because there's no flight path that will allow it? Sure. You know, it would be similar to the thought of a helicopter, right? A helicopter shouldn't fly over people, but it does it all the time at a safe distance. But they try to mitigate that as well.
Does it give guidelines on how far above?
It does not. The FAA leaves that to the regulation of the actual individual, but they state that you shouldn't be, because anywhere near a crowd in that sense. Because obviously you have to land these in different places, and it's not like a helicopter where there's helipads and different things. So, you know, it's again up to the pilot. You may have a crowd around you in which you have to land right where you're at, because we have a barricaded area for us. So just to give you an idea. So when we say fly over, it's like intentionally flying over.
Yeah.
Like there's a crowd here, and you can mitigate that by going around different ways. The best practice is to do that, not fly directly over. It would be to go around. But that's all that's all regulated by the FAA certification that everybody that receives that.
So in that, under procedures in this, on page 2, procedures, the first item A under authorized use does talk about, complying with all rules and regulations set forth by the FAA. One thing we could do here with that language, if it would make sense, under number 8, we could say FAA compliant observation of large gatherings. That might be a better way to phrase that.
That's fine.
So good flag, and thank you for the input.
To the officers that are here, did the Cleveland Division of Police already decide what make and model of the drone would be used?
Yes.
We have a video that, the link that Ryan found, it has a short video of that specific model. So there's a list of prohibited uses there. There was a lot of conversation around exigent circumstances. So we ended up not defining that because it's in other places, but we talked about it under 5 operational procedures, under item 5C. So we do have exigent circumstances there, unless absolutely necessary for law enforcement purposes and approved by the on-site command officer. And again, avoid flying over the devices over freeways unless absolutely necessary. And we have certain other mentions of the FAA as well in terms of protection of rights and privacy. So yeah, are there other questions? The one other thing I want to highlight that we did add under section, page 8. We talk about, number 15, we talk about reporting to the Community Police Commission. Number 16, establishing and maintaining a publicly available map on the division website shows the time, date, and flight path of all UAS flights within 48 hours of each flight. And that would also be included in the annual report. Now, this is in the conversation we had with the division's policy unit and the people who are running the program. They said this is not problematic. They're talking about doing this. They just haven't done it yet. So this would require that, so that people can go in and look on their website and see where the drones have been put in use. So that's an addition that Director Goodrick strongly recommended we add. And that was discussed. Yeah.
I can't remember what page it's on, but the section about the report that goes to the chief of police and the CPC for certain uses. Do you remember what page that's on? Oh, here it is. No.
There are a couple places we talk about the report. The one I just mentioned, on page 8, I believe, 8 of 9, number 15 includes the annual report. And then there's, I believe, later.
Was that more of an episodic?
Yeah, hold on a sec. I think it's toward the end. I don't usually look at this on paper. Let me just find it. All right, so
Oh, here it is.
Here it is on,
On page 3.
page 3, number 10
Yeah.
towards the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, report describing specific circumstances justifying the use. This is for exigent circumstances, right?
Yeah. So I remember when we created a kind of similar report with ShotSpotter,
Mhm.
we laid out what we wanted them to put into it. And maybe we don't want to do something as specific with this.
We have, it says say, describing specific circumstances justifying this use and explaining how those circumstances satisfy the Fourth Amendment requirements.
Okay, yeah, maybe
I mean,
that's
that's language adapted from the Oakland policy.
Okay.
And there's also, this is where we refer to search and seizure DPO for the relevant exigent circumstances.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I like that there were several ways that we're getting reports back through the annual report, through these exigent circumstances reports, and through the kind of periodic report. The other question I had, was there anything that the division disagreed with us on that we have in here?
My understanding is, from what I've heard from the division, things are largely, we're in agreement. We did have some language around sharing with the other entities and talking about creating a, if that's in here now, the process they have for doing that. They maybe shared using, there it is, using at the bottom of page 11. 11 and 9, I'll have to update that. But number D, data sharing, pre-structured web-based forms that request the following information. They already have a process, but this would update it. So.
And you said the entities, your police departments.
Yeah, so that language, they won't share any data with external organizations or other government entities via integrated technology. So it's not like an automatic transmission. There has to be a request for the information from other law enforcement or legal purposes as permitted by law. So, yeah. I think we covered the major changes.
I think it looks really good. Thank you for the work on that.
All right. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to ask the Division Unmanned Aircraft Systems.
A second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Shana Benito,
Aye.
Clara Early.
Aye.
Pete Van Leer, I say aye. So this passes and will be presented to the full commission at our next meeting in a week and a couple of days. All right. So since we do have time, I think we should have a conversation around the corrective action guidance and see if we can, what we need to do to move that forward. I will, yeah. So we have, you all have that, right? Did we print that out? Do you have it? You don't have it. You've seen parts of it.
I mean, I have it.
You have it. So,
What, I don't know what version it is. that we're
Yeah.
talking about,
okay. Do you want me to send it to you?
but yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
The printer's having a problem, I'm gonna have to call service.
All right, let me just send it real quick.
I can try again and see
sent
if I'm,
it to documents.
I have to go down the room.
This,
That's all right. Well, I mean, it's.
okay, that's sent. So we're still in process with this, so first of all, I want to thank Caleb Pincus and Richard Jackson for serving on sort of a mini work group that did a lot of work to draft this policy, and it was the basis for a lot of discussion with the division. And then, so there's been a lot of back and forth. I don't know that the copy I have here doesn't necessarily have your the latest additions from the work group.
I have gone through and read through both of them and have kind of highlighted a few areas for us
Great.
to
So
discuss.
if you want to lead the way.
Sure. Okay, so the first was on page 2. And I'm just kind of going through the areas where, and just so that everyone kind of knows, we got comments back from the CDP. Pete and I went through all of those comments and made changes based on what we thought based on the comments from them. So there were some that we were fine with and some that we weren't, that we disregarded or changed or had a different approach. And then we also sent the comments to Caleb Pincus and Richard Jackson, and then they gave comments based on CDP as well. So there are some places where kind of what we came up with and what they came up with was a little different. So that's what we want to kind of go through and discuss. So the first is on page 2, and the division had a concern with saying about wanting to say that they were examples of prohibited behaviors. And when you and I had gone through it, Pete, we were fine with saying that because, but Kayla and Richard were concerned about that. And the concerns that they had, let me pull up that comment, that using the term examples dilutes the exhaustive nature of the policy. We want to limit at-will additions to the group violations. So, and I think that the CDP's concern about saying that it's examples is you can't think of every possible thing that could happen. And so there's a little tension there. So we should discuss that.
Can you tell me, it's on page, is there a particular,
Page two on the third paragraph. So what we said before is that is the language that was in here before was the matrix is designed to list prohibited behaviors in the presumption range of corrective action, whereas the division is suggesting that we say the matrix lists examples of prohibited behaviors.
Right.
I guess, like, thinking through the division's concern, is there a world in which, by saying that this lists prohibited behaviors, I mean, I do think that the list does include items that I think could be a catch-all. General unsatisfactory performance, for example. Failure to respond, investigate, arrest, discourteousness. I mean, I guess I'm trying to think of, is there truly a scenario that there could be something that is not possible to put in here?
yeah, I think as you point out, when it says general unsatisfactory performance.
Sorry for coughing so much. I think that, if to add those sort of catch-alls, there was a whole risk why we were so, concerned about that language. And someone would basically have to invent a new thing that would go against the rule that has not been thought of yet. Well, I'm sure there might be some innovative way to be, to do something that's not been thought of before. If it's something so, I think the way we have it is good because we've known about this for a long time. These sort of, these problems are well documented. So I don't think.
So you're saying we don't need to say examples, we should keep it as our language from the work group?
That's just what I think.
Yeah, okay, good, I'm just asking.
Question I have is, are we concerned that the word examples kind of boxes us into just what those examples are? Is that the concern?
Well, it's kind of the opposite in ways. Like if we say we don't, it says the matrix lists prohibited behaviors. And that, according to the division's response, was like, it's really just examples because what if something doesn't quite follow you? So what we're saying, yeah, I mean, we're saying is like, you don't need to say examples because really it lists them pretty clearly.
I'm just gonna
Jason,
remind
you
you,
have
that's okay.
Yeah, come on, go ahead. Is that working now?
It is.
Hey.
The button had been pressed way too far.
I had a tendency.
You got a tendency to overpress buttons, man.
So,
Yeah, I think then one of the other kind of points to not include the phrase examples is that we include later on, which I don't know where the page number is right now, but, oh yeah, actually it's the same page. The matrix of corrective action will be reviewed annually and revised as necessary. And so I think then the idea is that what we're really trying to avoid is discretion in this policy. We want to limit the amount of flexibility for interpretation. And so to include, examples of, it really opens things up. If things come up that are needed to then, that somehow we've not included in this, like pretty exhaustive list of things, then, at that point it can be adjusted and revised as necessary.
that's a good point. Thank you. Right.
I think I'm in favor of then sticking with the original language.
Yeah.
Are you making,
Which is to remove examples, right?
Right.
well, yeah, so
I'm
I'm sticking with the
taking notes.
original language, okay, yeah, when the original language is, sorry. Is the matrix is designed to list prohibited behaviors and the presumptive range of corrective action. So
Okay.
we'll stick with that.
Good. You can move on then.
Okay. So there's a question on the definition of dishonesty with the phrase to deliberately mislead. That might be too difficult to prove.
I think that ended up in there, I think, in conversation with Director Goodrich around, trying to like really keep in use the language that will be, misleading and deceiving aren't that different. So I don't really know that I understand that, I guess. It's just
I'm not too concerned about it because it's part of a list of options. So it's not like it's the whole thing hinged on deliberately misleading. I agree that it's difficult to prove, but it can be used then if it is proven.
Yeah,
So
I think we should keep it in there.
What page you on?
I'm sorry?
What page you on?
3.
Okay.
Definition of dishonesty.
Deliberately then falls under, the word deliberately falls under false statement as well.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I would vote in favor of keeping it.
Okay.
Kind of covers like the omission, the lying by omission and lying actively lying. Yeah.
Keep going.
The next thing is, I think we all agreed just to note that there was pushback from the police on not considering aggravating and mitigating factors on group 1 violations, but we were all in agreement with that. That is important. So
Yeah,
we are not changing that.
This came up in our last conversation, and they mentioned that. Let's see what I wrote here. Yeah, they just talked about the consent decree, paragraph 246, that really talks about mitigating and aggravating circumstances, but there's different ways to read that. Because we do consider mitigating and aggravating circumstances in the other areas, then I don't think that issue holds in terms of the consent decree saying you can't not consider mitigating aggravating factors in one or two categories. So I think if we're in agreement, then we should stick to that.
There was concern about, on page 4, under the definition of a group 4 violation, there was concern about that when it says the descriptive criteria of a group 3 violation or involves any conduct which constitutes the failure to adhere to any contractual condition of employment or requirement of recertification as mandated by law.
So you're on number group 4 violation definition?
Yes. So I'll read the comment from Caitlin. This seems unnecessary to include in this section. More specifically, it can be overly broad. For an example, an officer not being firearms recertified within the 12-month period due to illness. For example, injured on the job, can't practice at the range, or due to their supervisor not scheduling their training, i.e. officers do not schedule their own training. In this instance, this could be solved by removing it from the section and relying on knowingly failed to supervise subordinates in group 2. What is an example in which a contractual condition of employment or requirement of certification mandated by law should result in their termination?
So the language you just read is how we would keep it, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Hmm?
The language you just read is how we should keep it? Is that-
No, it's saying that this section involves any conduct which constitutes the failure to adhere to any contractual condition of employment or requirement of certification mandated by law. The thing is that that's unnecessary. I'm less concerned about having language in here that's unnecessary than I am, you know what I mean, like, but
So what would the correct version of group 4 violation definition read? Did you read that?
I think it would just eliminate that
Please
sentence.
say it, please read it.
Sure. That what it would change to would be a group 4 violation is the most egregious and heinous misconduct, including conduct that could reasonably be expected to result in the death of another person and or exceeds the descriptive criteria of a group 3 violation. Group 4 violations carry the presumption of termination from the division.
So it's just taking off that violation or involves any other conduct.
I do think it's, if we're following this to the letter, if somebody becomes out of certification or something like that, then if that would carry the presumption of termination, could be sticky.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't really see the big problem with the language that we're talking about deleting. Just if there any conduct that which constitutes the failure to adhere to a contractual condition of employment. So if they don't follow their contract, I mean, that seems like grounds for termination. So I'm not sure why that shouldn't be in there.
I don't feel strongly about that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with leaving that language there.
Okay. Yeah, then let's leave it.
It was more a genuine question of like, what would an example be, but it's, I don't feel strongly about it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. The next big question.
Hold on a second.
Can I just, I'm sorry, ask a question? So, Commissioner Benito, you're going through right now, just so I'm clear on what the stuff that you're going through right now. What are the things you're going through right now? I know that they are amongst the things that were discussed, but they're not the complete amount. So I'm wondering.
And so Pete and I already went through the comments
Okay.
that from the division prior to you sending your thoughts on it, and we made edits and changes. So I'm going through the edits that are where where like there was a big question that we like said, okay, we could do that, and you guys said you shouldn't do that. So just basically looking at the draft that we had already like responded to the concern, to the comments by the division, but where what we did was different than what you suggested.
I follow. Just to flag this, I guess, that there are things that weren't in the comments themselves, but were in the body that were track changes to keep in mind. I don't know if you're interested in those. There were deletions and insertions.
So that was the last one that we did. That was one that the division didn't make a comment on, but you did. So that I brought that up. But the division didn't put the comment on the contractual condition.
Right.
Something that you just suggested.
I follow you.
Yeah.
I'm referring to just in addition to what you guys are looking at now, there's stuff that we've already passed through where we had suggested like either tweaks in wording, deletions, or additions in the track changes rather than exclusively in the comment. So I'm just, if you guys aren't interested in those, that's one thing, but I want to flag, make sure that you guys are aware that they exist.
I think I was thinking that first those small wording things. I'm less concerned about.
Yeah.
We can fix.
Definitely.
That
I gotcha.
Because the things that you're saying are like saying or versus of or things like that. That's mostly what I'm skipping over.
Yeah, there was like, you guys had been just discussing the dishonesty portion. We had commented about like the untruthfulness section, which is also in that definition. So that was when I first realized that I wasn't sure if you guys had incorporated some of that stuff. But you're right that a lot of the stuff that we did add were like relatively minor tweaks. So yeah.
I think I thought that the untruthfulness was similar to the discussion that we had on the dishonesty.
Yeah, it's just that they exist separately, like that there are two different definitions of it. Anyway, it's frankly, priority-wise is less important. I just was wondering like procedurally how we were going through to make sure that we didn't miss any bits and pieces as we were going along. That was all.
Thank you.
Keep going.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost my place now. Okay, there's a comment on page 12 where the division added page number 7 that said sustained violations against recruits or probationary status officers who engage in serious or intentional and deliberate misconduct will presumptively result in termination of that member's employment. The division added it because it was a concern of the DOJ and monitoring team, as noted in the semi-annual report. And Kayla and Richard said this is already written in the civil service rules and does not need to be repeated here. So I guess the civil service rules apply to people beyond just the division of police, correct? Is my understanding of the civil service rules.
I think so, yeah.
And so I think that we generally see, at least my perspective, what I've observed is that when things are written in other GPOs, we try not to repeat them and to reference them in GPOs, but when things are addressed in other parts of like the charter or that are separate, that it is typically referenced.
I don't have a problem with this language being in.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't see a problem with this language at all.
okay, I also wanted to keep that. Okay. Okay, so another So we are continuing, we are going, taking out number 14.
Which page? Which
Um,
page?
sorry, on page 12.
What section?
I don't see a 14 on page 12. Our pages might, I think it mixed up easily, so
The one I see
just talk
on page
about
7.
which,
Sorry.
what's the title and what's the, yeah.
Okay, so it's under the framework. The thing about it being examples, which we would need to take out because we,
On mine, it's on page 7.
Of that.
It would be, yes, under framework number 14.
right before violations.
Yeah, I see. Right. Yeah, I think that's fine. So we take it out.
Which you and I had already done. Okay. So then the next big one. You and I changed the discourtesy and disrespectfulness
Under,
under. So now we're in the section of violations.
right,
So we added, you and I had already added to group 1, adding coworkers and supervisors.
right.
So we were in agreement on that. I think the first biggest, disagreement that we had was they were open to the DUI being changed. So a first OVI should be a group 2, as it is an off-duty misdemeanor. I think was that a question that I think you and I were unsure about how we should treat first offense OVI.
Group 2 seems good to me.
We agreed on that too.
Is it just off?
We agreed on that too. That, I didn't see well, you guys may have had a differing opinion, but we agreed with them on that.
No, but what I'm saying is I think that when we discussed it, there were some questions that we had about that.
You doing okay, Ryan? Why don't you
Yeah, but just
take a break?
So cool.
Right, you can sit in there and do it. You don't have to be at the table to do minutes.
So when you and I discussed it, Pete, we said that we thought it should be group 3, but we wanted to discuss it. And it said there were some questions about what has been overturned and what's been overturned in arbitration. Looks like you had some discussions with the division on this.
Right, so they said first OBI should be a group 2, as it is an off-duty misdemeanor. It's specified off-duty, to answer your question, it specifies off-duty in a group 3, or wherever it ends up. So we had thought it should be group 3. And as they've had arbitrations where officers have had 2 OBIs in 1 year and they get their jobs back.
Okay.
In Columbus, 40, they have 4 hours and can use comp time, 40-hour suspension, they can comp it. And they just did, the CDP has done straight time of 6 to 8 days. And they just had an dispatcher who arbitrated to 3 days. County prosecutor, if the officer is found guilty of OV off duty, on Brady Giglio, and the commander there didn't agree, but disagreed, but he thought it'd be hard to sustain. So I think it was around, like you said, it was what's happening so, I mean, I don't have some great opposition to it. It seemed like off-duty OVI is a pretty serious offense, but, as we consider all the different pieces of this, it could, if it's really not going to hold up as a group 3. That said, we can also say we think it should be a group 3, and whatever arbitration, we can't be ruled by arbitration that we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But,
Yeah. And it would only be a misdemeanor if no one was harmed.
Right.
That's a question. So like, let's say you get an OVI and you hit somebody. Would that?
Yeah, I mean, then you're in group 3, unauthorized and or knowingly improper vehicle applies pursuit. Like you're hitting your.
But that's
injuring
while
someone.
driving.
Yeah, that's while
But
driving.
that's while working.
While working, yeah, that's pursuit.
Well,
Hold on a sec. Violation of training.
It also could be a felony.
Yeah, that's true.
So
So
then
that
what I'm
just-
wondering is, then would that be?
Yeah, it depends on the offense. So if it is more serious, then it becomes more serious on its own without, whether or not it's a group 3 or group 2 here. If you get a felony, that's a whole different thing.
So they have the ability to charge the offense now administratively, whether you're convicted of it in court or not. So if you just are charged with a crime, you can see them charge it on the spec sheet. So there's all different ways you can increase the penalty or a charge related to OVI if there's injuries, if there's death involved. So you'll see that in the way they charge, and then it'll change here because it isn't just OVI anymore. It'll be other things involved in that. So.
Okay.
So it's,
So that's not a concern then.
again, going back to your original thing, you won't have a cookie cutter approach to every single scenario in this, and if you wrap your heads around that, you won't ever move this forward. So at some point, you're just gonna have to say, is this as good as we're willing to get it and move it forward? Because I think you're already caught in the comment trap enough. You have so many people commenting on it right now that you're going to endlessly consider every comment instead of moving this forward, letting it be practiced, and then coming back and learning where there may be some flaws in it.
So
So
we put that in group 2. Is that the?
Yeah.
That's
I think-
correct.
yeah.
Okay,
I'm okay.
keep going, move on.
Okay. The next one was that I wanted to make sure we added. So Kayla and Richard suggested putting back in the Charter 115.5 violations that are termination offenses.
Mhm.
I can't remember.
Makes sense. Do you have that written somewhere?
So it's full cooperation by the Chief of Police, Division of Police, and Executive Head of Police Force required. The Chief of Police, all division of police members. So full cooperation with the CPC. So that would failure to cooperate with the CPC would be then what we would add.
And where would that be again? Sorry.
It would be a group 4 violation because
We wrote it as less than full cooperation, but failure, similar. Because it's full cooperation, so anything less than full cooperation by the Chief of Police, all division of police employees, and the executive head of the police force with the commission in performing all of its duties. See Charter Section 115.5. It's the exact language.
what kind of language did you?
I
No.
was like, I mean, I'm not.
Opposing, I was just like, wow, this is a group 4?
Well, I mean, it's the issue is that it's called Charter 115.5 says that's a terminable offense, and Group 4 is where terminable offenses. I mean, I think the challenge with that is there's some disagreement between us and CDP right now on certain things. So, like, for example,
Part of the reason,
disagreement.
agreed. That's a good point, Jason. The cooperation, doesn't mean disagreement, or however you just articulated that. The other
Right.
thing is that this was in response to Carney's suggestion about including termination language from 115. So we were trying to be accommodating with that suggestion.
No, that's why I brought it up. So what language would you guys like? to
So
put?
are we going with less than full cooperation, or are we just going with full cooperation for clarity?
So the language I suggested is less than full cooperation by the chief of police, all division of police employees, and the executive head of police force with commission and performing all of its duties.
And the reason for it being either, so it's under the violation. So full cooperation is not a violation, but less than full cooperation, or to Chandra's point, failure, or Commissioner Benito's point, failure to fully cooperate. So I think if I'm understanding correctly, the question is just on either A, including it, or B, including it with less than full, or C, failure to fully, if I'm understanding correctly.
I mean, I think that if the charter says about the terminable offense, I think we should include it. So, and just curious if you guys have feelings about the language. Okay, cool. So you have it? Or do you want me to read it again, or?
No, I've got it.
Okay, cool.
I mean,
Okay.
we'll talk, we'll
We'll fix
incorporate it.
clean it up. Okay. Another thing was the CDP said that we should replace the language unit with district.
We're almost done.
So in removing, changing, the division said we should change unit to district, but then Kaylin Richard brought up a good point that there are some units that are not part of districts. That there are some, groups of officers, the SWAT unit or some of the specialized units. And that is on page
10 under procedure.
12. Under procedure. So it said,
Let me find it.
for after misconduct investigation is completed for violations in groups 1, 2, and 3, and 4 by the assigned unit / bureau district. And the comment is this GPO applies to all CDP members, not just those who work in the district. Bureau has been changed to district because all bureaus are housed inside of district.
So it should read
It
By
should say
assigned
district
unit.
instead of bureau.
unit, district,
Yeah.
internal affairs superintendent.
Yeah.
Unit/district.
What's that?
Unit/district.
Unit/district.
I'm saying it's not a unit district, it's a.
Oh, I just, or comma or something, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, but bureau does not belong in there then, because that's included in district.
So now the biggest thing is the Fairness and Consistency Committee, which we need to do some discussion on. So the Kayla and Richard were in agreement with what you and I already agreed on, which is that saying that the Public Safety Inspector General and HR can't be mandated to attend something through a GPO. So we'd already talked about removing that. The division has expressed a lot of just resistance to it. And they're not in favor of having this Fairness and Consistency Committee. And they brought up some procedural points about confidentiality and public shaming, which we already don't think is an issue because the names are redacted from the information, and the committee does not review the full investigative report. They just review the section, the disposition letters that says this was the charge, this was the result, the resulting discipline. So I think the question that I have is if the idea behind this is to help the division start to do some of its own kind of tracking of fairness and consistency to then hopefully help the division have more fair and consistent outcomes. And this is a way of kind of helping them learn how to do that. But I guess the question that I have is, if the division does not want to do it, is it going to be successful? Like, and if they are truly like, you know, and I guess beyond that, is it going to be successful? Because I guess if they meet and they just check boxes, you know, whatever, that's maybe not the worst thing that could happen, and maybe the leadership is opposed to it, but maybe the actual members would like to do it and would be invested in it. But I guess the question for me becomes, when we think about whether to keep it in or take it out, is could any harm be done? Like, are there any issues with if they truly don't want to do it, and could they make decisions that would actually take us back in trying to implement fairness and consistency?
I just have one point to say on that, and that's, you're making an assumption that division doesn't want it because a few white shirts are against it, who actually are the ones that benefit from it not being fair and consistent in a lot of ways.
And that's why I said that the actual members
That's a strong
might.
statement to say that the division is against it. You've only spoken to the representatives that come here that represent the people making these decisions and have a record of using this matrix to.
Yeah, I hear you, and
from
that's
their
also
perspective.
why I said that it's possible that the actual members might want to do it and be
The
invested.
number one thing I've heard from in my 8 years here is the officers want more consistency and fairness in their discipline here.
So with that in mind, so obviously the points about not being able to require non-members of the division to be participating, so that in the moment leaves 3 non-bargaining associations.
So,
Hold on,
I'm sorry.
I'm speaking. 3 non-bargaining association representatives consisting of, we have Black Shield, Hispanic Police Officer Association, the Greater Cleveland Emerald Society. So it seems like we would need to fill that out. One thing we could do is look at voluntary participation from the Public Safety Inspector General or the Human Resources Department, just having them as, but really the core of it being the division doing the work. So the question then is, who else do we need besides those 3 non-bargaining association representatives? Do we need a designee of the police chief, or how do we?
So can I just,
Sure.
in terms of what we had recommended, so that we're all on the same page about at least our recommendation, was that we accommodate the concerns from the comments, and put 1 CPC representative in this committee, 1 CPRB representative, and then 3, and the way we wrote this was 3 division members appointed by the chief of police. The chief must first solicit 1 representative from each of the following non-bargaining associations: the Black Shield, the Hispanic Police Officers Association, and a Cleveland police representative from the Greater Cleveland Emerald Society. If 1 or more of these unions declines committee membership, the chief will replace that appointment with an officer who is currently assigned to basic patrol, holding the position of patrol officer 1. So, and then that was all in 1 bullet, because we were also trying to accommodate the idea that they cannot mandate certain representation from certain unions, and also we were accommodating for the fact that not all Emerald Society employees are CDP employees, so we, fix that part. And then the last bullet point is optional membership. The Public Safety Inspector General and 1 representative from the City of Cleveland's Human Resources Department may participate in the committee with full membership and voting rights if they so choose. That was our recommendation.
I think one thing that I'm wondering is there a concern, and I truly am asking these questions, it's not like me saying I'm against something. Are there any concerns with a CPC or CPRB representative being there and making, comments on these decisions than if they are later brought back to the CPRB or the CPC and they have made previous comments?
Our only thought on that one, which we all spoke about a little bit, but then we talked about a little bit further afterward, is that because there won't be any identifying information, that it would, and because you're not being made privy to the details of anything, that it really, because it's just quite literally like what this is aimed at is like, here's what occurred without the details. Here's what they were like found kind of guilty of in effect. Here is what they were supposed to be given in discipline. Were they given that thing in discipline? And just taking out all of the details, it's just another, because what we've found is that there's a large variance. And so in terms of that, which could be, and so we're kind of trying to add in just one layer of just, it's quite literally a check. Just make sure like that it did actually follow the matrix, because there is kind of nobody who systematically, other than what this body would be, to systematically be checking that it followed the matrix. And it would take quite a long time for it to get down the pike to somebody who could actually say, this didn't follow the matrix appropriately. And by that point, the officers have gone through potentially quite a negative experience, that sort of thing. So I just don't want to kind of give the impression that this is like an extremely involved process to the point that a CPC representative or a CPOB representative would then be biased against those specific things. It's just really like, just almost like double checking is in a kind of in effect what this is, and making sure that we're all then feeling like comforted by that fact.
Yeah. I think that, I guess my concern is we, even though we won't have the details and we won't have the names, if we are having a discussion with members of the unions, who then are the people who would fight us on a decision that is made in a kind of what could be, it's not a public meeting. So what happens if the union members, like, I just think that if the union wasn't the group that would then be, suing us over an outcome, and one of the things that, the union could potentially say is bias, or that somebody had already made up their mind, they could then point to some conversation that we don't really have a clear record of, that I just think it's sticky there. And, and I would be more open to having a CPRB representative than a CPC representative, because with the CPRB, those decisions are ultimately kind of sent back to the CPC if there's disagreement. So I think that there's then, no CPC members have had a discussion with, weighed in on.
One of the things that, or well, I guess two things to consider. One is to kind of directly address that, and then the other is maybe as a potential little solution, even if we do determine it to be a problem. One is that, as it is, the chief of police or the public safety director, without 115.5, are made privy to all of these things and are the people making these decisions. It's not like there's secrecy with them, right? There's all of the information is in the hands of the decision makers. But I hear your point. I wonder, one of the things that we had talked about was that these are not necessarily meetings, that these could just be emails, right? We also talked about Zoom. We talked about kind of different options for that, which if they're emails, they're public record. And therefore they have that kind of public component, which means that anybody could sort of have access. And it's not clear to me how much actual discussion would be involved in this. It's the way that we've written it out is more just like it's a vote. Does this, like, I vote yes, this checks the right box in the right violation group, or no, it doesn't. So that's something to consider, if we're worried about like the public nature.
I agree that that's really what this group should be, but when you have a group of people that are, that if they do decide to do in-person meetings, like, we don't tell them they can't do in-person meetings, that this group is more police officers than it is us. Like, and so my concern is that, and it's also when you get comfortable with a group of people and then you're speaking with them in private, I just become concerned about what and maybe I'm just being overly cautious, but.
Just a point of clarification. So the Fairness and Consistency Committee, from what I'm hearing, is just making sure that when discipline is handed down, then it's tracked according to how we set up our matrix and what the Division of Police agreed to from the CPC, right? So does that need to be all of these outside entities, or can that technically be a committee within the commission to track that data on how the matrix is working?
So we already do that, but the thing that this group is trying to do is to give the police some internal mechanism for doing that. So that, the hope with the passing this GPO and having the Fairness and Consistency Committee is that then we actually don't have to do as much of, because a lot happens to an officer. Like for an officer, if an unfair decision is made or it's unjustly, it's not according to the matrix, a long time passes by the time it's going to come to us and there's a full resolution. And it's also a lot of our time that goes into it. And so the idea is if we create some internal processes for doing that, then less cases end up coming to us. And also that then has a positive benefit to the officer's well-being. And so, yeah, I think to your point, absolutely, we'll be doing that always. But this is how can they be empowered to catch that internally so that it never ends up having to be a case with the CPC.
I think we need to just keep moving. So
Well,
unless there's something really,
yeah,
you've already
there's-
said your piece, I think. But
No, I mean, it's an ongoing discussion. So I'm not repeating, I don't have any intention of repeating myself unnecessarily. I am actually, and this would be a little bit of a question I'd like to bring Richard in on to get his 2 cents, but if the real purpose of this is what Kyle just said, if they find that it doesn't match the matrix, it's actually not clear in the way that we've written this that a decision comes from that.
No, it just goes to the PSIG and the CPC.
Just to flag it,
Yeah.
right? And so therefore, to that extent, because a decision, it's a vote that signifies whether it was fair or not, whether it followed the rule or not. I think to that point, I'm still thinking about, Chandra, I'm still thinking about your consideration about kind of bias. It's not actually a formal decision being made. It's just quite literally, again, did this follow the thing or not? So to that end, I think it also limits the kind of biasing concept. If, it'd be one thing if it was like somebody was sitting in on the hearing itself and was voting about the discipline itself that was actually going to be carried out. But because this is just a vote as to whether it follows or it doesn't, that's just something to note as well on that.
so
So yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that. Do you guys
okay
want
with
to do what?
keeping the CPC on, or
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I don't have strong feelings either way. I think there's reasons not to have the CPC, but
What do you think, Kyle?
I'm kind of either way too. I don't want to forecast, but based upon, your concern about involvement, that's why I was wondering, is this something that CPC can undertake as just a committee, knowing that we're just keeping, an eye on the matrix, if that's what it is. I mean, we could, because we're going to meet again next week, I believe, so we could talk about it throughout the weekend, spend some more time on it for clarity.
yeah, I think we should get as close as possible and redo a draft and then come back to it next week. I think that would be, rather than sort of having these unnecessary questions, I think we've got it. This is a really great discussion. Let's just sort of move through and then we'll share a cleaner draft in a day or two and go from there.
There was also, okay, yeah, so we'll come back to that, but I feel I'm okay with kind of either option now. There was a recommendation to change from a verbal reinstruction to saying coaching, verbal counseling, letter of reinstruction, remedial training, and or referral to employee assistance instead of just saying verbal reinstruction under the corrective action matrix.
I think that was sort of aligning the language from both parts. I think it should say coaching, verbal counseling, noise instruction, remedial training, referrals to employee assistance. So that's the same as it is on top.
Okay.
That's kind of a mind, just like making
Sure.
sure it's clear. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then I think that takes us through all of the big comments. And then there's some language things that we can just clean up. Was there anything major that you
I
wanted to
think-
add?
Just I'll email.
I'll email my recommendations on the committee piece that we just talked about.
There was like an addition, I'm just looking for it, sorry, because if there's other things, you should do that, I'm looking for. Oh, yeah.
Something, oh my God, so loud, sorry. So I'm looking at, under the framework, this is 2. So we had recommended, just as and again, you know, this is not exhaustive, but I know that this was one of like the bigger adaptations. So we recommended removing the language that was written for number 2, which says it should be recognized that any matrix system can only be designed for the large majority of cases, and that on limited occasions, extraordinary circumstances would justify a penalty less than or greater than allowed under the matrix. In such cases, the justifying factors will be explicitly detailed in writing. That was something that I think that was a division addition. So we recommend removing that in place of a foundational purpose of this policy is to explicitly define what penalties would be administered so that officers know exactly what the ramifications are for their behaviors, to take out the unnecessary unknowns in their day-to-day work. While the violation list is not all-inclusive, as every possible infraction cannot be predicted, the penalties for those listed must remain unmoved. Which kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier, but sort of explicitly articulates it.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So we will take that language in. So yeah, I'm looking through. I think there's very little else that we need to do besides just kind of marry the different versions that we have.
Yeah, so thank you to Kayla and Richard for your work on this, and and Pete and I will clean it up and get it ready. We'll take your comments as well for the Fairness and Consistency Committee and anything else you send, and then we'll have a ready to pass version for next week.
Okay. If there's no other public comment,
Cool.
no, I don't think so. We will move to adjournment. And yeah, so next week we will take this up. Hopefully we can work pretty quickly. I think the time we've talked about is 2:30.
Yeah, that works.
And there's also the automatic license plate readers, which are a small work group of the small subset of the surveillance tech work group had done some work on. So maybe we'll be able to bring that up too and see if we can move that forward. But this will be a priority, the corrective action guidance at that meeting. Okay. So with that, we will adjourn this meeting, and thank you all very much for a productive meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, officers.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Take care.